Today, we discover a story where a quiet life is shattered by an extraordinary secret. Samuel Washington, a humble hospital worker, loses his beloved wife Lorraine, only to find she's left behind not just memories, but a hidden fortune meant to change the world. Shock turns to courage as Samuel faces elite families, social prejudice, and the pressures surrounding his son's high-stakes wedding. In a breathtaking moment, dignity triumphs over wealth, reshaping relationships and forging an unforgettable legacy. Lorraine's fortune becomes a force for good, sparking a foundation that lifts children and unites communities. Grief gives way to hope as ordinary routines transform into lifelong impact. And one small family's love ripples through an entire city. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from? Have you ever thought you knew safety? Believed your home was an unbreakable sanctuary, your child wrapped in layers of love and care while you worked to secure the future? Jessica had. Every morning, she walked out her front door, casting one last look at Kem, her bright 6-year-old son, trusting in the woman she called family, Mama Grace. But what if the greatest danger didn't lurk in the unknown shadows, but right in your living room, wearing a smile you paid for? That ordinary afternoon, as Jessica pushed open her front door, she stepped straight into a nightmare. Her heels clicked against cool marble, her tired heart heavy from a failed business meeting and the choking Lagos traffic. Ahead, Kem was on the floor, his tiny knees pressed to the stone, hands lifted as if to ward off a blow. Hovering above him, her beloved, dependable Nanny. Mama Grace's features, usually so kind and maternal, were now contorted with a fury Jessica had never imagined. The air vibrated with silent threat, the tension visible, humming between raised hand and cowering child. For a heartbeat, time froze. This wasn't a burglar. This wasn't the faceless danger she'd feared as a child herself. This was the trusted woman who'd braided Kem's hair at breakfast, who hummed lullabies into his dreams, who greeted Jessica every single day with warmth and reassurance, masking grim intent beneath careful grace. The scream ripped from Jessica's throat unbidden, a mother's anguish, pure and raw. "What are you doing to my child?" The words carried an elemental power, stopping Mama Grace in her tracks. For a slivered moment, the mask she wore slipped entirely, revealing a flash of real violence beneath. Then, as quickly as it had cracked, composure returned. She spun around, smile forcibly gentle, voice dripping honey. "Oh, Ma, you're early today." Kem was just refusing to focus on his homework. We all know how dramatic he can be about math. But Jessica's mind, already spinning, caught the lie. She was supposed to be gone 3 more hours, immersed in conference rooms and proposals. Instead, she was here, in her own house, confronting an ugliness she couldn't yet bring herself to name. She didn't see calm. She saw her child's body rigid, fear etched in the set of his shoulders, the silent tears running down his cheeks. Jessica's own hands trembled, knuckles white around her keys. Time stretched and snapped. She realized with devastating clarity that this tableau wasn't new. How many times had Ken crouched defensively on these cold tiles, while Jessica sat in distant meetings, believing, paying, trusting? Mama Grace's smile widened, the practiced calm of someone who had dodged suspicion for years. Children are so sensitive, Ma. He just needs a little discipline. Nothing out of the ordinary. But Jessica had seen the look. The mask had slipped, and the horror was undeniable. Jessica knelt, calling softly, "Kem, come to Mommy." Her voice, stripped of authority, trembled between command and plea. A prayer for forgiveness and a desperate call to safety. But the boy hesitated, his gaze flicking between the two women, his abuser and his protector. In that instant, Jessica's heart shattered. Her child's fear wasn't just of Mama Grace. It was uncertainty, confusion about whom to trust, proof of a trust broken so often that he'd forgotten safety. This time, her beckoning finally reached him through layers of trauma. Kem scrambled forward, burying his face in her arms, his small form shaking like a leaf in the wind. Jessica wrapped both arms around him, a shield against the world and a failed apology for all the hours she hadn't been there. In the ruined silence, she was no longer just a mother. She was a witness, and witnesses, she vowed silently, could never again be unaware or powerless. She gazed at Kem, her radiant, confident child, reduced to frightened silence. All at once, recent months unspooled in her mind. Unexplained mood swings, growing reluctance to come home, bedtime tears that made no sense until this moment. Now, every vague hurt, every emotional withdrawal assembled itself into a horrific truth. Kem's suffering was deliberate, orchestrated by hands she'd believed were safe. In stony silence, Jessica ordered Mama Grace out, words betraying none of the volcanic rage churning within her. Each step of the woman echoed down the marble hallway, the sound of high heels, a punctuation mark on 2 years of hidden torment. When Jessica reached to comfort Kem, he flinched reflexively, a gesture that cut deeper than any confession, a sign that the pathology had seeped beyond the physical into something more insidious, a loss of trust that might never return. "Am I bad, Mama?" The question, quiet as a feather, landed with the force of a landslide. Jessica's throat closed, grief rising. She knew in that moment that Mama Grace's greatest cruelty had not been the blows themselves, but the poisonous story she had woven, convincing Kem that he was not worthy of love or safety. Jessica clung to him, her voice now as fierce as prayer. "You are the best thing that's ever happened to me." She repeated these words again and again, as if sheer repetition could cleanse the lies, could rebuild what was broken. Within 20 agonized minutes, the Lagos police sirens wailed. Relief and dread warred in Jessica as help arrived, as if by their presence alone they could sanctify the violated sanctity of her home. Detective Inspector Aduni Okoro appeared at the threshold, her every movement deliberate. She surveyed the tableau. An overturned chair, rice grains scattered in panic or punishment, a little boy's shoes thrown aside in haste, and a quietly seething mother cradling her child. Mama Grace, forced to wait in the corner, resumed her well-practiced mask, hands primly folded, the picture of accidental misunderstanding. "Officer, please, there's a terrible confusion," Mama Grace announced in that same syrupy tone that had charmed Jessica for years. "I was only disciplining the boy properly. His mother is so busy. Someone has to teach him respect." But Detective Okoro's sharp eyes absorbed more than words. She had seen this before, heard these justifications, witnessed the blurring lines between correction and cruelty. The performance would find no sympathetic audience here. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," Okoro interrupted, producing a pair of handcuffs that glinted with unsentimental authority. The mask fell away as rage erupted. Ungrateful child, he deserved what he got. Mama Grace shrieked as neighbors peeked behind curtains, disbelief echoing down the quiet street. Jessica, arms wrapped unyieldingly around Kem, could only watch as the woman she'd trusted was led away. No longer guardian, but exposed as a predator. A door shut with finality, and in the sudden silence, Jessica sensed not peace, but the beginning of hope. The possibility that, with the monster gone, healing could finally begin. For days after Mama Grace's arrest, Jessica and Kem were enveloped by a heavy, invisible shroud. The echoes of that afternoon haunted every corner of the apartment. Jessica moved through rooms with a new alertness, a constant vigilance that left her exhausted. She watched Kem carefully, noting every small flinch, every hesitant step, every time his gaze darted to a closed door, as if he expected his tormentor to materialize once more. Nighttime was the hardest. Kem, once content to drift into sleep with his favorite stuffed lion, now clung to Jessica's side, his tiny fists twisting the fabric of her nightgown, as if terrified she might vanish too. Kem's breathing, shallow and irregular, became a metronome for Jessica's guilt, a guilty mother, letting her child fall into the arms of a betrayer. She tried to keep routines intact, school in the mornings, dinner together at night, but nothing felt normal. The gaps left by Mama Grace's absence, her humming, her presence in the kitchen, the small rituals she'd built into their lives were reminders that even comfort could harbor darkness. Jessica caught herself wondering how long the wound would stay open, how many days it would take for the hurt to fade, for Kem to laugh without looking over his shoulder. Desperate for answers, Jessica sought help. She called her closest friend, Adaora, whose steady voice had anchored her through countless storms. Through choked tears, Jessica recounted what she'd witnessed, the moment trust shattered, the details of Kem's suffering that kept replaying in gruesome detail. "How did I not see it, Ada?" She sobbed into the phone. "How did I not know what was happening right in front of me?" Adaora's response was gentle but firm. "No one expects the devil to wear a familiar face, Jess. You loved your son. You believed in the good in people. That's not a crime. It's what makes you human. But now you know. and knowing is the first step toward making it right. Taking Adaora's advice, Jessica reached out to a child psychologist, Dr. Obinna, a kindly, eloquent man who specialized in trauma recovery. Their first meeting was tense, with Kem hiding behind Jessica, eyes darting warily. Dr. Obinna greeted him not with interrogations, but with patience. A box of colored pencils, a pile of blank paper, an open invitation to draw his world in whatever way felt safe. Lessons bloom. As the session unfolded, Jessica watched as Kem began to sketch. At first, anxious spirals and dark scribbles, but slowly, over the weeks, bursts of bright color edged into the margins. Dr. Obinna explained that healing from betrayal came in hesitant steps, each one worthy of celebration, each setback a reminder that pain was not permanent. The process of rebuilding trust proved both humbling and exhausting. Jessica had to relearn motherhood, this time as a protector and an advocate, not just a provider. She made a promise to herself and to Kem. Never again would she place blind faith in a stranger, no matter how comforting the illusion. Some days, progress was obvious. Kem began to whisper secrets again, or would ask shy questions about Mama Grace. Will she come back? Is it my fault? Each time, Jessica found reserves of gentleness she didn't know she possessed, calmly assuring him that none of it was his doing. Other days, the wounds reopened without warning. The smell of rice simmering, a dish Mama Grace had made often, would send Kem running to his bedroom, trembling. It was on these days that Jessica truly understood the depth of the trauma her son carried. But with time, stamina, and the unwavering presence of Dr. Obinna, cracks of light appeared within their darkness. Jessica took time off work, replacing the rigid confines of her corporate life with afternoons spent in parks, chasing dragonflies, laughing with Kem in a way she'd previously deemed an indulgence. The sound of his hesitant laughter, light, trilling, escaping like air from a balloon, became the daily proof that progress, though slow, was real. Outside the safety of their apartment, the world felt changed as well. Neighbors approached her with hushed voices and wary glances. Some expressed shock, disbelief that Mama Grace, so warm, so pious, always seen in Sunday's best, could harbor violence within her heart. Jessica heard it all, the whispered blame, the subtle insinuations that she should have noticed, should have protected her son better. She listened with a heavy heart, but did not argue. Instead, she silently forged her resolve, determined to transform her pain into prevention, her shame into advocacy. A few brave souls from the community offered help. Rides to therapy, hot meals left on the doorstep, heartfelt notes that reminded her she was not alone. Gradually, she realized that while some would judge, others would quietly assemble around her as shields, an unexpected coalition of protectors, each one dedicated to helping Kem heal and helping Jessica forgive herself. A month after the incident, the day of Mama Grace's trial arrived. The day Jessica dreaded, yet anticipated. The courtroom was austere, the chill of air conditioning failing to dissipate the heat of public scrutiny. Kem stayed home with Adaora. Jessica alone would bear witness, determined to stand tall for them both. Mama Grace appeared in her usual head wrap, eyes darting from the legal officials to the unfamiliar faces gathered in the room. But there was no hiding the bitterness in her posture. The way she sat hunched in the dock, refusing to meet Jessica's eyes. The proceedings unfolded quickly. Testimonies were given, Jessica's shaking voice describing what she'd seen, police notes cataloging evidence, Dr. Hobina recounting Kem's trauma in gentle but devastating terms. Throughout it all, Jessica felt conflicting waves of anger, sadness, and even pity. Lessons bloom. She thought of the countless children whose cries went unheard, the thousands of homes where silence still hid violence. When the final verdict was read, a sense of closure swept the room. The judge's words were solemn, echoing the story that Jessica and Kem, together, had finally brought into the light. The trial's conclusion unleashed a torrent of emotions that Jessica had struggled to contain. Relief washed over her in waves, but it was not as decisive or liberating as she'd imagined. Yes, the sentence gave her a measure of justice, a public acknowledgement that her son's pain was real, that Mama Grace had violated the very essence of trust. But justice felt incomplete. Kem's nightmares did not simply dissipate, nor did Jessica's self-blame evaporate with the court's ruling. Leaving the courtroom, Jessica found herself outside, beneath the open sky. The buzz of Lagos traffic, a living contrast to the suffocating atmosphere she'd just escaped. She closed her eyes and inhaled, a conscious, shaky breath, as if she were filling her lungs for the first time in weeks. As she did, the sounds of the city blurred together, the calls of street vendors, the laughter of children, the distant honk of impatient buses. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to weep, not with desperation, but with the first real hope that healing could follow suffering. Reuniting with Kem, Jessica knelt to his level and held him close, her lips brushing his forehead. She told him about the court's decision in the simplest, gentlest words she could summon. "She won't hurt you again, Kem. You're safe with me. I promise." In his eyes, she saw a deep longing to trust, mixed with the residue of fear. But she also saw something new, a glimmer of curiosity for life beyond the boundaries set by trauma, a fragile hope that time could piece together what had been torn apart. As the days pressed onward, a slow transformation began within their home. Jessica, no longer distracted by relentless work obligations, started cultivating an environment where Kem could begin to rebuild. Their days grew filled with deliberate kindnesses, a morning ritual of shared cocoa, afternoons of inventive play, evenings spent snuggled together under thick blankets while reading favorite stories. Jessica introduced Kem to new hobbies, hoping each one might help him reclaim his confidence. Painting, gardening, and even gentle yoga became part of their routine. Sometimes laughter erupted naturally, surprising both of them. Other times, it felt forced, like a performance, yet Jessica persevered. She understood, through counseling and quiet introspection, that real security would only take root with consistency, patience, and her unwavering presence. Jessica also made space for conversations about feelings, something she had never prioritized before. Together, they labeled emotions in bright crayon on construction paper and taped them on the fridge. Joy, anger, fear, hope. Some nights, Kem would take a new word from the fridge, holding it up, asking if she ever felt it, too. In these moments, they shared vulnerabilities, learning that strength lay not in silence, but in speaking the truth, even when voices trembled. Life outside the apartment gradually resumed its rhythm, even as Jessica protected Kem from overwhelming change. School, once a battlefield of anxiety, became the next obstacle to face. On the first day back, Kem gripped Jessica's hand so tightly that her fingers throbbed. She knelt down, looking him in the eyes with all the courage she could muster. "I'll always be here when you need me. No one else will hurt you. I promise, Kem," she whispered. Though scared, Kem nodded and allowed himself to follow his teacher through the school's bright corridors. Jessica watched his small back recede, feeling the twin pulls of pride and worry, hopeful that this brave step was the beginning of renewal. At first, Kem clung to routines, avoiding playground games and group activities. Teachers, alerted to his history, treated him with gentle understanding, shielding him from the usual sharpness of school discipline. Slowly, Kem began to interact with his peers. A smile here, a shared snack there. Jessica celebrated these tiny acts of courage, showering him with quiet praise and love. Each day he came home a little stronger. Meanwhile, Jessica herself grew into a new role, advocate. She started to share her story with others, not for sympathy, but to warn, to enlighten, to prevent. She spoke at school parent meetings about vigilance and the subtle signs of childhood distress. On social media, her heartfelt posts inspired messages from other parents, confessions, shared fears, and, heartbreakingly, their own stories of betrayal. Each story connected them as a community, bound together by a desire to keep their children safe. She also partnered with Dr. Obinna and Adaora to organize workshops for local parents and caregivers. These gatherings became lifelines, spaces where hard conversations about discipline, abuse, and trust could unfold without shame. Jessica learned how deeply secrecy perpetuated harm, how cultural taboos around abuse so often silenced its victims. Her mission was simple: to turn her pain into a force for change, to ensure no other family would suffer in the dark as hers had. Despite the daunting nature of her new advocacy, Jessica found empowerment in action. She was no longer a silent bystander in her own life. Each meeting, each conversation, helped her understand that what had felt isolating and shameful was in truth shared by many. Out of tragedy, she was building solidarity, hope, and most importantly, resilience. As seasons changed, new routines solidified in Jessica and Kem's lives. With deepening trust, their laughter returned, richer and brighter than before. Birthdays and milestones, once marked by the shadow of old wounds, emerged as symbols of renewal and possibility. Jessica found joy in the mundane again. The chaotic mornings, spilled cereal, the silly dances they shared in the hallway. Even Kem's small rebellions, the occasional tantrum or mischief, were now accepted as signs of normalcy, evidence that he was reclaiming his childhood piece by piece. Yet, healing was not linear. Some nights, nightmares still woke Kem, and Jessica would rush to his side, soothing away imagined monsters with songs and whispered reassurances. But each episode grew shorter, and afterward, Kem you'd climb into Jessica's arms, no longer afraid to reach for comfort. They both learned that scars did not have to define the rest of their lives. Rather, scars could be reminders of survival, proof that love could endure and even flourish after betrayal. By now, mother and son were not just survivors. They were warriors, united by their vulnerability, strengthened by their unbreakable bond. Looking out her bedroom window one bright morning, Jessica realized with quiet gratitude that their story was no longer only about loss and pain, but about a resilience that could not be tamed. Spring sunlight poured through the windows, casting patterns across the living room floor as Jessica and Kem cut colored paper for a school project. Their laughter, once a foreign sound in these walls, now rang freely without the heaviness of hidden fear. The past was not forgotten, but it was no longer a shadow over every waking moment. As they worked together, Jessica felt profoundly thankful for the second chance they'd both been given. A life in which joy could coexist with memory, and hope could gently overtake pain. The process of recovery revealed secrets about strength neither mother nor son had known they possessed. Jessica marveled at Kem's resilience, his willingness to trust again, to nurture new friendships, to ask for help when the world felt overwhelming. She learned to celebrate the small victories, each spontaneous hug, each creative outburst, each time Kem turned to her with vulnerable honesty. Their connection deepened, evolving beyond the typical contours of mother and child into something forged by adversity and reconfirmed by every new day together. Still, reminders of the past lingered, a sudden shout at the playground, a stranger's knock at the door, the wind rattling the shutters at night, all could trigger a shiver of old dread. But Jessica met these moments with calm reassurance, listening patiently to Kem's fears, validating what he felt, rather than brushing it aside. By bearing witness to his truth, she offered not just protection, but a model of compassion, a lesson in how to hold pain without letting it define the future. Steadily, Jessica's influence in the community grew. Parents began to seek her out for advice and support, finding solace in her openness. At workshops, she became a beacon for those burdened by guilt or paralyzed by the fear that they too might miss silent warnings. Jessica offered words that she wishes someone had spoken to her before. Real love isn't just trust. It's vigilance, curiosity, and courage. Our children need us to notice, to ask, to listen, even when the answers are difficult. In partnership with Dr. Obina, she helped establish a neighborhood support group for survivors and families affected by domestic abuse. Through shared meals and storytelling sessions, the group transformed into a safe haven where wounds could be named and addressed. Kem sometimes attended these gatherings, sitting close to Jessica and drawing pictures that reflected not just old pain, but emerging dreams, a hopeful sign that healing and community could reshape even the most painful stories. Soon, Jessica was interviewed by a popular Lagos parenting podcast. Her trembling voice recounted their ordeal, but as she spoke, strength replaced shame. She challenged listeners to dismantle the silence that allowed predators like Mama Grace to thrive. Messages flooded in, gratitude from parents, confessions from survivors, promises from local officials to tighten caregiver screening. Through her vulnerability, Jessica found purpose. Through her advocacy, she sparked a wider conversation about what it truly meant to keep children safe. As months passed, collective victories grew. School authorities instituted new background checks for all staff and caregivers, including workshops on recognizing trauma and responding with sensitivity. Jessica saw the seeds of change she had helped plant, blooming slowly but surely through policies and practices. The pain she and Kem endured was being wielded as a shield against future harm, not just for themselves, but for an entire generation. At home, Kem's curiosity flourished. One afternoon, he asked if they could visit the city's new children's museum. Jessica hesitated for only a second. Crowds and unfamiliar faces still made her anxious, but she smiled and agreed. The museum visit was a triumph. Kem darted from exhibit to exhibit, his laughter rising above the clamor, his gaze alive with wonder. Sitting in a bright corner by the art room, he turned to Jessica, cheeks flushed and eyes shining. "Did you see? I wasn't scared," he whispered. Jessica gathered him in her arms, overcome by a surge of pride. "You're braver than anyone I know, Kem." In that moment, she understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but its conquest over and over, day by day, step by step. With every milestone, their bond grew stronger and more sacred. Jessica began documenting their journey in a journal, letters to Kem, stories of resilience, catalogs of little victories and lessons learned. Someday, she hoped, he would read them and know the full scope of what they had survived together. Not just the pain, but the love that rose strongest in the aftermath. On the anniversary of the day their world had changed, Jessica and Kem held a small ceremony together. They released sky lanterns from the balcony, each carrying a message, one for the sorrow they were leaving behind, and one for the hope ahead. "To new beginnings," Jessica whispered, watching the glowing lights drift above the Lagos skyline. Beside her, Kem smiled, his hand clutching hers tightly, both of them lingering in the grace of the moment. In those warm orange lights, Jessica finally felt the heaviness begin to lift from her heart. She realized that survival wasn't just about getting through the darkness. It was about choosing over and over to search for light, to create new memories, and to give each other the gift of unconditional presence. Their story, once marked by betrayal and loss, transformed into a legacy of hope. Jessica continued her advocacy, never forgetting the lessons forged in struggle. She remained a vigilant mother, a courageous storyteller, and a steadfast friend to all who dared to reclaim their power after violence. Kem, growing in confidence and kindness, became known in their community for his empathy, a child who understood more about the shadows and the sunlight than most grown-ups. Years later, when Kem looked back on that chapter of their life, he saw not just the scar left by Mama Grace, but the unbreakable love his mother offered every day. Together, they reminded one another that healing was neither quick nor perfect, but it was real and it was possible. Their home, once a sanctuary defiled by betrayal, had been reborn as a haven, shimmering with laughter, forgiveness, and trust revisited. In the end, Jessica's journey was a testament to the strength that comes not only from surviving darkness, but from lighting the way forward for others. And Kem's journey was a testament to every child who dares to trust again, a child whose bravery was made possible by love that refused to let go. And as dusk settled over their neighborhood, Jessica looked at her son, her heart fierce and full. Yes, there would always be memories. But finally, there was joy and an unshakable belief that whatever storms life brought, they would always find their way home together.